All right. So I have my two templates. I have my silhouette and my basic circle. Now it's time to get the clay out. So I need a small amount of clay to start with. I'm not going to use a whole lot of clay, just a little bit. I'm going to go ahead and compact it in my hands. Try to work out those air bubbles. Get all the clay back to the center so it's not coming out all over the place. Okay, so I have my ball of clay. My next step is to flatten this out and create a slab. If you don't have anything to roll it out with, that's okay. You can just use your hands. So I'm going to just start to flatten. I'm going to flip it over and flatten a little bit more. Flipping constantly ensures that it gets an even thickness and that it's not going to stick to the table. So I'm keeping my slab somewhat thick. It's not that thin. It's about 1/2 inch, maybe 3/8. It's about equivalent. It's just under. It's significantly under, but this is the thickness of the slab. Here's the thickness of a Sharpie for comparison. It's thinner than the Sharpie, but only just. Now that we've pounded the clay, we need to smooth it out. And you can use a credit card rib. If you have pottery tools at home, you can use your metal rib. I'm going to use the metal rib for this. The credit card rib works just fine. Whenever we're working with slabs, we need to relax the platelets back into each other. So we're just going to gently compress in one direction, change, compress in the other direction. And this will also help us find any air bubbles that may become present or express themselves. We're going to take a sharp tool. A toothpick will also work. And we're going to pop any air bubbles that we see and compress. Okay, so I'm going to go ahead and flip this over. Compress this side. So now I have this nice even slab. Okay, and it's been well treated. I'll flip it one more time. And now it's going to be time to cut out our circle template. Okay, you can use a variety of knife tools. Anything that will cut cleanly, we will use. Pardon the bell, we're at school. So I'm going to just cut straight in to give myself a starting point, and I'm going to start to come around. I'm going to do my best to come around. I'll remove this section of clay. I'm going to rotate it so it's easier for me to cut. So now I have this extra clay. I'm going to hydrate it, crunch it back up, and put it back in my bag. Okay, so I'm going to remove my template, and I have roughly a circle. Okay, you can take your credit card rib will actually work better for this part. So I'm going to take my credit card rib. In my case, it's my lovely little CVS card. And I'm going to just address any misshapen edges, pick up and rotate, and try to get it back to circle as best as I can, right? We want this to be as cylindrical and circle as possible. Ooh, starting to get stuck because my credit card rib was wet. All right, so now I have my circle. We will be rotating this frequently. So it's going to be hard for it to rotate on a table, even that's not porous. So we're going to prepare a tool for ourselves. I'm going to grab a sheet of paper and fold it in half. And then fold it in half again. And this is going to be what we use to help us rotate around on the table. As we work, this may get destroyed and you may need to replace it. Okay? But as long as it's dry, it'll rotate just fine on a surface. Okay, so now I have my disc of flat clay. I'm going to need to score my exterior of my disc. Lots of crisscross or hashtags, right? It's going to take a little bit of time. Make sure you do it right. You don't want it to fall apart. You don't want your bottom to come off. Okay, so this is scored and prepped and ready for an attachment. Okay, I'm just going to set this aside, and I'm going to work on the next piece that we're going to attach. So I'm going to grab another lump of clay. This is the one I actually cut off. And make sure my clay is well compacted. I recommend you do a large amount, so that way it's easier to work with. For this demonstration, I'm just going to do this small little guy. Okay, I'm going to start rolling him into a log and start creating a coil. Now mine has gotten flat, so you have two choices. You can either pat it down to try to even it out, or you can give it a nice twist. And the twist, I find, helps redistribute the clay more evenly. So I like to do the twist. Myself a nice starter coil. Even thickness. It's going to take practice to get coils nice like this. Okay, so the coil thickness is about that of a Sharpie. Closer, we want to get closer to the smaller end of the Sharpie, so I'm going to roll this a little bit more. Because if your coils are really thick, then your vase is going to be really heavy, and we don't want really heavy, chunky vases. Okay. All right. So now I'm going to bring my base disc back into play. And I've noticed I see some cracking happening on my coil. That means it's lost some of its moisture and it's not quite as hydrated as it should be. So I'm going to go ahead and add some moisture back in and roll some of that moisture back in, so it has a better chance of bending without cracking. All right, I'm going to go ahead and place this where I think it's going to belong. Starting, this is the foot of the vase. We're going to start at the bottom and work our way up. Okay, I'm going to cut this end off. I never keep the ends because they're always like mangled and gross. So start right here, and then I'm going to lay it gently on top and cut again through both of them. So now I have this little piece coming out, and they should line up really nicely. So now I know that I can slip and score the back side of this. We want really strong, really tight connections, especially down here at the bottom where it's going to take the weight of everything. I'm going to slip and score these ends together too because I want them to have a really strong connection. Okay. Grab my slip. Ooh, slip's all watery. Rework my slip a little bit. Okay, and I'm going to take some of my slip and I'm going to just put it on the edges over here. We'll do the same thing all the way around on this guy. You can use a brush if you have a brush. If you don't have your brush, you can use your hands. Don't be afraid to get messy. And we're just going to work this in. I'm going to go clean my hands because I use my fingers. I have a big old sponge to just clean my hands. Keep a towel nearby or a cloth to dry your hands. That way you don't go through a ton of paper towels. It's also better for the environment. Okay, so now I'm going to take my coil, put it back on my little disc. Remember how I said the paper might get destroyed after a while? That's exactly what will happen. Okay, now I'm going to use a tool to help me blend this in. So if you have a popsicle stick, I just sanded the end off so it's kind of rounded. Sanded the end off so it's kind of rounded. Or you can use a pottery tool that has the same kind of arrangement. I'm going to use the pottery tool. And I'm going to do the inside first and physically move the clay down and in to the base clay. So I'm going to just compress that clay down and in. Okay. So I'm actually smushing it into, don't start at the top, start at the middle and push that curve in there. You can use your finger too. Fingers are fine. I have a cut on my finger, so I can't use my finger right now, so I'm going to use a tool. We want to make sure we have a super strong connection. It's well compressed. Okay, that's the outside. Clean our tool. That's the inside, I'm sorry. And now we need to do the outside. Okay, the outside is the same thing. Let me see if I can show you. I'm going to hold this up so you guys can see. Don't work with it in the air. Make sure it's flat on the table. Take the clay, physically move it downward. This is how you get really good coil connections. You need to physically integrate the clay into the piece of clay below. And it's going to look messy and it's going to look terrible at first, but we do have some cleanup that we're going to do before we move on to any other steps. Okay, so I've gotten it all the way around. I'm going to clean off my tool. The next thing I want to work on is cleaning this up. So I'm going to take the credit card rib works the best. You can use a wooden rib that's straight. Anything with a straight edge, if you have a piece of plastic or a piece of wood, that'll work. And we're going to scrape the outside edges and push into the clay. Scraping the outside edges and pushing into the clay. Paper's getting messed up, but that's okay. I'm going to remove the excess clay off of my rib. And here's where I really want to start thinking about that cylindrical circle form. I need to go ahead and do the same thing to the inside, support the outside wall even at this short, and blend the inside seam. If you clean as you go, it makes your work that much cleaner at the end, and it's a lot less cleanup for you to do at the end. There's nothing worse than cleaning up chunks of leather hard clay at the end of your project. So make sure you do it as you go. It saves you a lot of time, energy, and effort in the long run. All right, so this is step 1 of actual clay making. Okay, and in the next video, I'll show you how to build up. My base is kind of gross. I'm gonna flip it over. I may have to get a new paper soon anyway. All right, that's it, and I'll see you in the next video.